Hello and welcome. I'm super excited today to be able to have this chance to speak with Michael Patrick Gibson, the author of Paper Belt on Fire, which is a fascinating story that talks about the founding of the Thiel Fellowship, which gave grants of $100,000 to students to encourage them to drop out of university to start their own businesses. It also shares the founding of the 1517 Fund, which now invests in student dropouts and renegade entrepreneurs, and overall is just a burning manifesto of why higher education, or the system of higher education that we know today, is actually killing innovation in the world, and that it is time for something different. This book just lit me on fire, and so I'm very excited to have you with me here today, Michael.
Thank you. That is a very kind and awesome intro. Thanks so much.
To kick things off with power, I wanted to ask you, short and sweet, if you could put in your own words, what would you say to someone, a young person that's considering their options, going to university? Why is it the biggest waste of money and their life possible?
Oh, wow. That's multi-layered. You know, on the broader perspective, it's really about trade-offs and costs. If someone doesn't really have a direction in life and they don't really know, let's say, what careers they want to pursue, and they just think about college as a time for exploration, it's just become so expensive. You know, now tuitions are pushing $90K up to $100,000 at some of the private elite schools. That's the sticker price. Sometimes people get discounts, but still, it's just so expensive. And then if you're taking out loans, you may be burdened with student debt that may crimp and constrain whatever your dreams are after you graduate. So you may think of college as a time for exploration. You show up, you accumulate, $300,000 in debt. Suddenly, that was a expensive vacation time, and you have to get to work when you're 22, probably in a well-paying job, but one that isn't your dream or passion. And the only reason you're taking that route is because now you have to pay down this debt. So that's like the highest level. You know, on the more subtle, like nuanced side of things, I'm really interested in exceptional creative achievement. And that could be in the arts, it could be in science, it could just be across any domain. To create unique and valuable things, oftentimes you have to be a unique person, or someone who's on the outside. Innovation is always coming from the outside in. And so what I see with in the US really, but also in a lot of other nations, you see this monolithic path to what everyone considers to be a fulfilling, successful life. And that path starts in elementary school, if not younger, and people are chasing prestige, chasing good grades, chasing good test scores. And then ultimately, it's all to impress a college admissions committee who will then award you a slot in this game of musical chairs at a prestigious elite university. Now, one of the weird fundamental principles at work is the more you compete, the more alike you become. You see this at a superficial level with brands. So think about water. There are all these different water companies out there. And you have to really become a connoisseur to tell the difference between Evian, Fiji water, smart water. The packaging changes a little bit, but when it comes down to it, it's just water. So the more they're competing in this category of water, the more alike they become. And so the same is true of us and our lives. And so if we're all competing on these dimensions that college admissions committee thinks are admirable, then we're all going to become alike. So that's the first premise. The next premise is the more alike we become, the fewer unique ideas that we have. And the fewer unique ideas we have, the less innovation we have as a whole, as a society. So, just that broad argument about the homogenizing effect of this whole system, I think can strip people of their uniqueness and therefore their creativity. So that's another thing that worries me about that. So if I'm giving advice to a young person, irrespective of whatever they do, that is a concern. Then the next thing is to study creative achievement itself, which is like with the Thiel Fellowship, we learned quickly that the common statistics that these institutions rely on to predict someone's future, let's say their future at an elite university and then beyond it, their future in their career, the stats people look to, like your GPA, your test scores, what university you went to, the rank of that university, we quickly learned that these are flawed and outdated statistics when it comes to predicting someone's output as a creator. And there's a history to that too we could talk about. And what we learned in the fellowship is that other things mattered, someone's curiosity and courage. That's not something that the academic system is really good at measuring or even developing, because the whole system is based on, you have to deliver answers to someone else's questions. You have to turn assignments in on time that have to look a certain way, and so on. So yeah, we just learn these are flawed statistics. And so if I was young and trying to help the next generation cultivate their talents, I would want to learn more about what really does contribute to, accomplishing extraordinary things, or, joining epic teams, building the future, rather than, what are these old, outdated, sometimes even negative statistics when it comes to that.
You're very political almost in that response, that it's homogenizing, but I actually think it makes people dumber. And it makes them less able to think for themselves, and it's actually quite terrifying.
Okay, so that's fair. It's interesting. In my book, I don't even get into the indoctrination. So it's like there is a political angle here where the universities have just turned. They're just so extreme left-wing dominated now that people graduate and their brains are addled by French critical theory and Marxism and so on, and in that sense they don't have the knowledge that really comprehends the world and how it works. But then there's maybe something subtler underneath what you're saying, which is these schools preach critical thinking, but they're really turning you into this like parrot that knows how to provide the answers it wants.
Exactly. I felt that really strongly, actually even lower levels. When I was in Senegal at one point, a friend was setting up a Montessori school, and she had hired 2 people, and one had I think a regular middle school education. He could speak a little bit of English. That was actually really good for this village where they were. And someone else who couldn't read or write at all. She had not done any education. I think she had 6 kids.
Oh, wow.
And it was just mind-boggling to me, the differences between them, because if you asked them to do a simple task, anything that required the brain, the guy who had gone to school just couldn't do it. And it was really shocking to me, because I knew this in theory, but to see it in such stark contrast, that education, people think that it's a right, that it's something good for everyone. But bad education is actually, it's like atrophying the brain. It's actually...
I love John Taylor Gatto. I don't know if you've come across his work. Some of these bigger ideas about how independently of the content of school, just the form it takes produces the effect you're describing, which is we march people, we segregate them by age. They have to sit in butts and seats for 6 hours. They have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom. This is all cultivating a learned helplessness. The character trait of like needing permission to do basic things like go to the bathroom or find a moment for oneself.
Yeah, magnified across whole populations is just really scary. So one of the things that I was thinking about, something that really leaped out to me from your book, is this response that you got from Scott Galloway that was saying that, yes, there will always be the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Kobe Bryants who can drop out of school and succeed, these special geniuses, but you should assume that you are not that person and go to college. And so that like hit me hard.
Yeah.
But so yes, does this unique path only work for geniuses or people who have some kind of special traits?
Well, I guess, what people like me have to contend with is the fact that college pays, certainly in the recent past. And what I mean by that is just look at the average income of college graduates compared to people who only have high school diplomas. And there is a gap between the two. But the question that I want to examine, and there are other researchers in this, is like, okay, what explains that difference in income? In simple statistics, right? We learn that if 2 variables move together, they correlate. But that correlation doesn't tell us necessarily what the underlying relationship is. If A and B move together, it could be that A causes B, or it could be the reverse. B causes A. Or third, that there's some deeper principle or some other C that is influencing both to move in the same direction. So maybe that's like very abstract. But here's what, to bring it more to the point here, is if college pays, all right, the more college you have, the more income you make. Does that mean that college is causing that? Or is there something else to explain it? And I reach for the explanations that go for answer C. There's something underneath it. Number one is just like the quality of the people. All right, so college, through its admissions process, is selecting very capable, intelligent people. So that means they already have these attributes before they enter into college and then when they come out. So college isn't causing that. If everyone who has those attributes in our society has to go through that path, then it's going to look a lot like college is causing the increase in pay. But they already have these capabilities. If they didn't go to college, they'd still make more than the person who just has a high school degree by nature of, because everyone goes to college, who has those attributes. Okay, the next thing is something Brian Kaplan, the economist, researched, and others, which is that, there's this sheepskin effect where if you're learning skills in college that then get rewarded in the labor market, then for every year of college that you attend, you should earn more money. Turns out when you look at the data, that's not true. Yeah. It's like a lot of the income boost comes from finishing that last test for the last credit to get the degree. If 100 credits are required for graduation and you have 99 and you get hit by a bus on the way to that exam and you miss it, you're going to make 20% less or 20 to 30% less than you would. So the skills argument that college is causing the wage difference doesn't hold up with the sheepskin effect. So you have two things under here. You have the selection bias of taking talented people. Then you have the signaling argument, which is like, okay, there's something else going on there. You have to finish the whole thing to signal something else about yourself. And that just explains a lot of the wage difference to me. So Scott Galloway, what I would say to him is like, if you can find another way, you don't have to be a superstar, but if you can find another way in the labor market to signal something about yourself, whether it's the skills you have or your degree of commitment, your willingness to undertake a 4-year project, stay loyal to it and finish it out, then okay, you don't have to pay $100,000 a year to do that. We see this in technology companies. Many of them do not require college degrees. You have a much more likely chance of getting a job at a tech company if you are, there's something called GitHub where people upload their coded projects and other community members vote on it. It's like you have a better chance of getting a job with a tech company with a great GitHub account than you do handing in your resume. So that's an example where you can signal these things about yourself to employers without needing the degree. That was a long, convoluted answer, but I think it's important to really investigate and examine, what is it? Why are these people paid more in Group A than Group B?
Well, and also I feel, hopefully, that it's shifting more, not just in tech companies, but in general, to have more opportunities that don't require a university degree. I see the future moving towards more freelancing and more entrepreneurial paths that don't require.
Yeah, because if you're freelancing, you have maybe a portfolio of work. You got to start somewhere. You need a lucky break, or maybe you start entry level, but you build up a body of work and people see that. One quick thing about what you just said brings up some problems with the college degree is like, one, most people pursue careers that have nothing to do with their degree. And number two is everyone forgets what they learned. Just think about anyone, if you've studied a language, Spanish, French, or whatever, it's use it or lose it. So like 10, 15 years later, people don't even remember what they learned. And that must cause trouble for any skill-based argument for college, because it's like you've forgotten the skills you supposedly learned.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've never understood from an employer's point of view, why they care about these certifications, because I think at this point we know it means nothing if you've done your 4 years of French in school. I know
right?
that
and then throw in things like grade inflation. Think of Harvard's Enron style of accounting where everyone gets an A. What does an A at Harvard even signal anymore? But these gatekeepers in HR departments at like dinosaur corporations, they get a pile of resumes and they're like, okay, how can we winnow this down? All right, let's just keep the resumes with college. And then of those, which ones have elite degrees on them? It's just this quick and dirty way for them to sort through a labor application pool, rather than trying to figure it out for themselves.
Okay, so rather than just focusing on the negative, which I could happily do all day, what about the alternative, right? So let's say I feel empowered. I know that I'm willing to stand up to my parents and say, no, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to pick my own path. What do I do, right? What if I don't have an idea yet? Because a lot of the examples you gave, these guys tinkering with radar and stuff as kids, and they kind of naturally do it. But what if I don't quite know yet what my path is.
Geez, well, if you're a lost soul in the middle of nowhere, I guess that's like a big problem. I don't there. That's like a life question that may require, exploration through reading across different things, exposing yourself to, different ways of life and different, let's say, businesses or institutions. Just sort of expose yourself to what's out there. But let's say you just have some inkling that you want to be a part of the economy today. You want to, or there are sectors within the economy that are interesting to you. It could be Hollywood, it could be Silicon Valley. The first thing that should stand out here is that I'm describing geographies. So the first thing I would say is figure out which part of the world you want to make a contribution to. Could be science, could be tech, could be Hollywood, could be something else somewhere. But there's a somewhere, and you have to move there. I firmly believe in the powerful educational effects of creative clusters. So when you move to a location, you start to rub elbows with all these different types of people. There are mentors, there are competitors, there are just random conversations you have with people, and there's knowledge sharing occurring, even if this is just like small talk conversations in a cafe. If you look at the history of productivity and achievement, it's like it always occurs in a specific location for a period of time. Think of like Florence in the Renaissance. So I would think about like where you want to live. The next thing is when you get there, you got to figure out this question of how are you going to make a contribution? That's going to help you figure out what skills you need to learn in order to make that. You could do everything from work backwards to like, okay, what are the entry level positions at companies? Try to figure out what skills are necessary for that. This is like real education, not like made up education. You're going to have to learn these skills in order to convince people to hire you. Ideally, maybe you learn on the job, and so it's just like, hey, you're willing to do an entry-level job at low pay in order to pick up the skills that then you can build your future success on.
So not being too impatient of being like, no, I just need to have a startup idea. I need to go big all at once. You're still looking for
I'm not even talking about a startup. I'm just like, think about what excites you. What do you want to be a part of? What team do you want to join? Who are your heroes? Who do you admire who's still alive working? You want to get close to those people. They really are role models, and you want to learn from them. And it occurs there are going to be different levels of this pyramid, where let's say in the world of Silicon Valley, it's like Elon Musk is at the top, or someone else, Dario Mode. But I would say Elon Musk is the Michael Jordan right now. Okay, he's very high and very tough. You're not going to like get up there. So you got to find people on the lower levels of this climb, and ideally want people who are like one or two steps ahead of you. Those are going to be the real powerful role models for you, because they're going to know more precisely and concretely what skills you need in order to get to that next step.
You've written about how you feel like San Francisco is dead, or it's no longer the place. How does that work into this?
I have to revise that. I said I wrote an obituary for San Francisco in 2020. Just seemed toast. Politically, it was intellectually and morally bankrupt. The just problems of governance in the city of San Francisco to California as a whole were very dire. But there has been two things that swung that in the other direction. One was the creation of a whole new $1 trillion industry. So, AI is like the creative fires of Silicon Valley were still there. OpenAI, Anthropic, Tesla, and like there were presences in the Bay that enabled that revolution, and it now has created a powerful magnet for talent in AI that refutes my claim that it was dead. The next thing is that for so long there had been this major gap between wealth and power in San Francisco. The wealth was created by the tech industry, but they didn't seem concerned with political power, and that's what led to so many problems. Suddenly they woke up. You started to see infusion of money into elections, people trying to influence who's in power. And you did get a little bit of a swing back in the pendulum to some normalcy in San Francisco. Daniel Lurie was elected mayor. He's done a better job of trying to help people on the streets, trying to make crime illegal again. Hard to believe. So that has helped the city a little bit. However, all of that said, the state of California is still an unmitigated disaster. You have leftists trying to pass a billionaire tax. This would seize the wealth of a lot of the billionaires and tech billionaires in the Bay Area. A lot of them have fled, even though the law hasn't passed yet, just because of its threat. So the golden goose is not killed yet, but its neck is still
But it's
very
strangling. It's
yeah.
surviving.
The neck is on the chopping block still. It's not over yet.
So where else would you recommend?
So look, Silicon Valley is still a hotbed of innovation. So if you're interested in AI, maybe you do want to spend some time there. Southern California, still threatened by the same institutional forces, but it is also a powerful cluster for space, aerospace, defense, hardware, just a tremendous tradition there of building things. So that's like in Los Angeles, Orange County, towns like El Segundo have taken off. So that's another location. But buyer beware, because you may find yourself taxed by socialists in power soon to be. And then beyond that, I would look to Austin, Texas. Texas in general, but Austin in particular, is booming because California is trying to kill itself. We know a lot of people who have moved there. Companies have moved there. We backed a small group of people who have started a new town south of Austin for hardware startups. It's called Prototown. It's a cool spot. There's a lot of opportunity there that's growing every year. And then there's still, some burgeoning places. They're very small ecosystems, but they're not strong. And this is for tech. And that would be like New York or Miami. I think of those two, Miami probably has the best future prospects because New York is suffering the same problems as California and San Francisco. So, all right, that was a long list, but that's if you were in tech, I would say that's where you should look to move.
And do you mind? Could you share why you've chosen Telluride, Colorado?
Yeah. So I've had to come to terms with this myself. So I when COVID hit in 2020 and everyone spread to the wind, I was one of those people. It felt like there was a greater opportunity that remote work would actually work and that you could live anywhere. But what I've realized over the last 5 years really is just how important that geography is. So I'm on the road a ton. It's been really trying and challenging, and now my place is up for sale here. So I will be moving out and relocating.
Can I ask to where?
Probably to Austin.
Okay.
I might have a presence in California, but for tax reasons, I don't want to go into too much. I don't want to move there just yet because we have some companies that might have IPOs in the next year or two, and I think not only would it be financially foolish for me, but I think it's immoral for that government to take any of that money. So I'm going to hold off on that. But I think it could be Austin, Texas, might be somewhere else.
Okay. So back to more practical advice for young people on this path. You mentioned that there's certain sub-traits that you've learned over the years are very indicative of having a lot of potential as founders. And are these things that can be cultivated? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, let's just take, we use different terms for these in the book. I'll sometimes call things like edge work or edge control. Yeah. Really underlying that is some kind of practical action mixed with courage. It's like your ability to spend money to try to do new things, but to not be reckless with it. The thing with these virtues is it's like you can have questions of too much or too little. There's a golden mean you want to hit. And when it comes to courage, it's like you can't just recklessly spend all your money trying to do something.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can't be so stingy that you don't spend any money for experiments. So there's a golden mean there. But when I think about courage, it's such a fascinating concept because, there's a history and philosophy of thinking about courage going back to Plato. There are debates about it, but it's one of the things that stands out to me is how we can be courageous in some areas of our life and not others. So it's like you meet Navy SEALs who have done heroic acts under fire, and then they return to San Diego and they can't discuss conflict problems with their wife because it's too emotional or something. So they're afraid of emotional intimacy, but they can run under a hail of bullets. That's kind of interesting to me. Intellectual courage, right, could be very different from both of those as well, where are you willing to be routinely unconventional? Can you be a person of one arguing against 20 people in a room? Are you comfortable with that? Just having unorthodox views? That's okay. We recognize it in people, but we don't do a good job of cultivating this in our schools and in our lives.
It helps if that's the goal rather than being punished for that. If you obviously you'll go in the other direction if you're if it's beaten into you, that you need to just repeat or be aligned with.
But that is a trait we look for because, all right, so there are these sets of traits that we think are necessary for success. They don't guarantee it. There are lots of people who have all these virtues and then, because of bad luck or bad timing or who knows what, things don't work out. But for the ones where it does, they do seem to be necessary. And one of them is that independent thought, that intellectual courage. So like different kinds of courage to like lay it down on the line, take these risks with your life, but also to, have this independent judgment to make decisions and to stand firm by them, to, have unconventional views against the consensus. That's something we look for in people. There used to be this question we would ask, which would be, what do you believe is true that the rest of the world thinks is false? And what we were trying to get at with that was this intellectual courage. Now that question has become so famous, people come prepared, so it feels less interesting as a question. But nevertheless, we're trying to find that trait in people and just hear it in their lives. So it's like sometimes I can't avoid it. I got to be in a pitch meeting. It's the first time I met the person, so we're going to have to ask questions. But ideally, I've known someone, at least for a couple months, and hopefully interacted with them in other ways besides just a business situation, so that I can get an honest assessment about, okay, what are this person? Does this person have any unorthodox views? Have they ever said something that was unpopular? If I get to see that, and then they tell me they're starting a business, I have greater confidence that they have the courage to move it forward.
And that's something I think really unique about your approach, is that you invest in the people, not just a business idea, but you invest in the founder, their character, and things like that.
Yeah, because when we were giving Thiel Fellowships, and now when we make investments, oftentimes it's 2-3 people, maybe a prototype, but it's early, and there's basically no business yet. So there's no validation that what they've created is of value. So the only thing we can rely on is the character of the team.
Yeah, and actually it's very impressive and astonishing the level of patience that you have. The fact that you guys give $1,000 grants to people pre-idea.
Yeah.
Well, everyone else wants validation, confirmation. They want to know that it's a safe bet, but you do the opposite. It's actually a tremendous.
Well, it's incumbent upon us, I think, to have the courage to take that risk. I think a lot of our institutions and people are just risk averse. They don't trust younger people to do great things. So it's like in the academy, you got to pay your dues for 12 years beyond the age of 18 before anyone trusts you to do anything. That's outrageous. Even longer, actually. You look at the average age of grant recipients, it's like 38 to 40. And that's outrageous because we should be, funding some radical, bold ideas that younger scientists have. As the people who are allocating capital, whether it's a grant or an investment, I think it's up to us to take some risk too, and to do our best to try to reduce the amount of evidence we need before we make a decision on, like, okay, is this person worth backing? Because the risk-averse person is always, I need more evidence. Yeah. Like all those things you listed. It's like traction, validation, degrees, credentials, whatever. All this evidence, no. It's like we got to get better at using less and less evidence in order to predict someone's trajectory.
Actually, I was curious to have perhaps an example of maybe a more ordinary person that you've backed that's turned into something great. Because, for example, for me, reading Steve Jobs' biography wasn't as inspiring because it was all focused on how he's a genius. And whereas for me, I loved reading Shoe Dog with Phil Knight's story because he was just so ordinary. He just made tons of mistakes, but he just kept going, and things worked out in the end. So do you happen to have any examples like that to share?
Yeah, that aren't like tech businesses that depend on some scientific innovation. We certainly have worked with other types of entrepreneurs, and in that sense, maybe they're a little more down to earth. One would be Janet Liriano. She's from the Dominican Republic, but lived in New York for a long time. She and her sister, cocoa plants are a big crop down in the DR, but because it's not as developed as some of the other regions of the world, the cocoa market and the chocolate market just haven't been developed, but it's very high quality. So Janet and her sister pitched us on starting a chocolate company in the DR. using their connections with these local farmers who, maybe they have phones, but it's not like they have spreadsheets and systems of accounting and other, aspects of modern business, using those relationships to develop a global cocoa business, cacao. I never know how to pronounce these things. And so they've done it. We started with an investment, and now, 5-6 years later, they've become the biggest chocolate provider out of the DR, which is incredible. And that just took hard work. It's hard enough to start a business in the U.S. Imagine doing it in a place where, it's not as business friendly. There are all these rules and just old ways of doing things that Janet and her sister had to overcome. It's not, who knows? I mean, there are consumer product businesses that have become quite big. Think of Chobani. That's a great story. I think there's a book out there on that. I just know the highlights, which, this Greek yogurt company coming out of nowhere in New York. And so there are stories where, you can build an empire. But I think it's just sort of what you're saying, where it's like, wow, these two ladies with a dream of having a chocolate company, they made it happen by dint of hard work and some belief capital and, really understanding the global cacao business.
That's interesting. I didn't know you guys, and saw something on the website that you don't get involved in businesses outside of the U.S.
Yeah, I know that's one of the rare exceptions. There are exceptions to everything, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, Janet's still a U.S. citizen, but still, yeah.
What do you see about the future of growth internationally in comparison to the U.S.?
I think there's just so much talent in the world. That's one thing that inspires me. I meet people all the time from South America, from India, from Europe, and they all wish they could come to the U.S. because this is the NBA, this is the Olympics, this is where you come if you're going to build something with ambition. But it's really hard to get there. There are all sorts of immigration challenges. So some of these people are just left where they are. And I think it's just really hard. In terms of the ladder that you climb, Silicon Valley has all the rungs. You've got the mentors, you've got the know-how, you've got history, you've got capital, it's just incredible. In these other places, there are some rungs missing in that ladder that make it challenging. There's a lot of bad advice out there. So it really is tough. So what I wish is somehow this knowledge through books like mine, podcasts like yours, is, as we disseminate the knowledge out there, maybe people can start things where they are. There are always going to be challenges because of politics, laws, regulation, taxes that are not, they stop businesses from succeeding, but people can still do what they can, and maybe they can find successes.
Yeah, well, to wrap this up, as I mentioned before we started recording, I'm here in Prospera, one of these, a free startup city. What are your thoughts about the network school or network states or these charter cities in terms of developing innovation further?
Yeah, the original dream was that we should treat government like any other business. And what that means is, monopoly is a bad thing. When there's a monopoly or a cartel, high prices and no innovation. How do you break that up? You need new entry. You need to allow new competitors to enter the market who have a different set of rules, a different arrangement. That happens all the time in Silicon Valley. Microsoft didn't invent the search engine. Google just did it on its own. And AI was not invented by, the big players. The large language models were invented by new players. So the same is true of governance. And the problem now is that we live in a world of a cartel. There's no more land to really start new things. But the promise of the free cities or the startup cities was that, okay, maybe we can convince some governments to say, okay, let's set aside a plot of land, somewhere that's not politically contentious. And maybe on that plot of land, we can allow people to play by a different set of rules. And Prospera is a great example, probably the leading candidate here, where, okay, there are powerful reasons Prospera can succeed now. People have choice of law with contract. They have, they're not beholden to anti-business regulations. And so that really creates hope in those pockets. I think that for the developing world, for other regions of the world, is okay, you can come to Prospera and start something, which is really exciting. Because, it's going to be hard. I don't know, it seems like we're in a race between politics and technology, and politics may win. But it's escape valves like Prospera that give me hope that, okay, if California turns the lights out and somehow Texas is turned over, maybe people who are trying to build the future or to at least have an exciting, cool place to live where they can be free, then maybe Prospera is the answer. There are other efforts out there. I'm I'm an advisor to a fund called Pronomos. They back a lot of these other efforts, places in Africa.
Have you visited Balaji's network school?
And I've been to the network school. Yeah, I'm friends with Balaji. We go back some ways, and I'm excited by what he's doing. I visited, it was early days, so it was just like the pioneers there. You saw some young men sleeping on floors in sleeping bags. I think they've come a long way now. They've basically got a resort with lots of people moving there, building businesses. A lot of digital nomads, but also people who are looking to find a different place to settle their roots. What I think is cool about his school is that there is all that talent out there in Southeast Asia and other places where they really want to learn these skills, they really want to build, and I think the network school and what Balaji's doing there is pretty exciting for that.
Yeah, it's bringing what you were saying, the ladders of Silicon Valley to the people
exactly.
Normally. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really love this conversation, and it's very interesting to hear that you'll be moving to Austin. I have a lot of friends that are moving there for the same reason, so I'm feeling drawn there as well.
Okay.
But overall,
hopefully we can cross paths sometime. That would be fun.
Yeah.
And I hope to make it down to Prospera too.
Yes, absolutely. You should definitely check it out. It's not as lively as one would hope, but the foundation is here. I guess that's why it's interesting to hear. It's sad because from an intellectual perspective, obviously, I want to believe that with the right systems, the right structure, the talent will follow, entrepreneurship will bloom. But in a way, sadly, it doesn't work that way in San Francisco, even though they're doing so many of the wrong things because people are already there, because
history, we underrate the importance of history. It's instructive to be reminded that Silicon Valley started in the 1940s, so it has a long lead. And so if we're in the 1940s for Prospera, I think it's going to take 40, 50 years to really get going.
And I'd say on top of that, comfort. I'm saying that it's a lot harder than you think for people to move to a new place, to adjust, even if
that's true.
The taxes are so much better. Even you seeing it, you still have to sell your house and you have to, uproot your whole life. And
absolutely.
We're not just little robotic actors that respond.
Yeah, you can't. We're not interchangeable parts that can just be swapped in and out and put someplace. Which, my heart goes out even more now to the immigrants who did do that in the 19th century or before. It's like, wow, uprooting yourself from Europe, moving to America, that must have been quite the courageous thing to do at the time.
Exactly. And that's why a lot of immigrants have a lot of these characteristics.
Yeah, right. I think there's some people who say that's partly one of the reasons for the U.S.'s entrepreneurial advantage.
Absolutely. So if people want to follow you, you're most active on Twitter, right?
Yeah. It's funny. I was a journalist in 2007, near the dawn of Twitter. And so I thought it was this funny tool for poetry. So named my handle is after I started the account in 2007, and I chose the name of one of my favorite poets. So I'm at William Blake. You can find me. I'm pretty prominent out there I'm pesky. I'm active. All right, let's just say that. Yeah.
And if someone wants to get involved with the 1517 fund, either as an entrepreneur or as an investor, what are some of the options and what is the best way?
So we have a contact form on our website. Me and the rest of the team, we read those all the time. We're constantly sorting through those. So that's the best way to reach us. And it gives you space to tell us more about what you want to work on and some of the things we talked about here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. That was great.